time you Q&A.
Yeah, we got,
Okay.
everybody okay for questions? Okay. Did you find any questions, people?
Not yet.
Okay.
Uh,
I have a question though.
Yeah.
So you talked about peer review journals, the way they're kind of rigged.
Mm.
What would you replace peer review journals with?
Yeah, good question. I think we must learn to if we make a lot more use of the internet. I think the internet, social media, i.e. having blogs, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, that's why sharing ideas through those, and even YouTube, just talking about this stuff on YouTube and fielding questions and exchanging ideas. I think that's very important. As far as writing, I think we should put more effort into writing books. Not, you don't necessarily have to write a big book. It can be a small. We can put down our ideas in books and just get it edited for sort of ease of understanding, to get the message out, etc. Because what's happening with peer review now is that it's become a self-serving process. If you write something new, you could discover something new and write it there, and one of the people reviewing it differs with his findings from his work that he did whichever year. Instantly it gets sidelined. And if you read the stuff that happens in peer review, that appears in peer review journals, certainly in the conservation field, it's just a chorus of these things I'm saying. The 30 by 30, we need more land for wildlife. We need to do more carbon sequestration. The Maasai's cows are polluting, and they are overgrazing, and it's just these prejudices repeated over and over again. And the problem is that scientists, peer review has become like sometimes it became a measure of a scholar's quality. You say, oh, he's got 60 papers. They could be rubbish. No one talks about what he actually wrote or said in those papers, but it's the number of papers he has. And it also drives you getting tenured in the university, getting research grants and all that kind of thing. So it's sort of, academia has become like a capitalist venture, a business venture almost. And that's a problem. We can see even in universities now with the endowed professorships. You are the let's, for instance, you can say you are the Bill Gates chairman of Department of Ecology. So if a student comes up there and finds that the Gates Foundation is doing something that's harmful to the ecosystem somewhere, you can't publish it, because basically Bill Gates owns that department. And you've seen all these universities, they have these endowed chairs, which is fine, but universities should change the system. If someone gives a university a grant, that's great, but he can't give a grant that my grant is funding that salary of that chair of that department. That's a control thing. And a lot of these capitalists, 1%ers, they're like children. They want to grab all the toys and marbles and everything and put it in their pockets. Yeah, so we have to find a balance. I think for scholars, let's make more use of social media, or even gatherings like this. It's because in my personal experience, all the peer-reviewed papers I've written have not got even 10%. I've even had 10% of the influence of the non-peer-reviewed work, like the Big Conservation Live, or certain blogs, or even articles I've written in Popular Press.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I read a book a while back, and I totally forget the title of it, but the point was about global warming and
Yeah.
fighting against it. It's not necessarily individuals who are going to win that. It's entire industries.
Yeah.
That are going to truly help the
environment.
ecosystem of the entire world. So how do you see humanity like mitigating that stuff?
Yeah, I think we can start moving on that, but I think I'm speaking as a scientist. I think scientists have been the biggest obstacle to that.
Mhm.
Because as scientists, ideally we should be, from our knowledge and technical knowledge, etc., we should be able to go and advise Boeing, this is how you can build your planes environment to be more environmentally friendly. How you can modify your production lines to use less electricity or whatever. But instead of doing that, because that if Boeing does that, it might cost them $2-3 billion to change their factory settings and etc. But instead of doing that, scientists are going there and telling Boeing, if you give me $3 million, I can go plant trees in Kenya, and you'll be fine. And you can continue building those planes if the planes are polluting and that kind of thing. So it's that dishonesty that has come into it, because people people have to. The other thing is that, as you said, we need to approach it at higher resolution. The US, for example, as an example of a country, should approach, how do we stop polluting in the US? How do we reduce emissions in the US? Not how can Kenya plant trees to help us. And Kenya should also look at, what are we doing here? What part of it is for us? Can we, instead of kicking people out of this area and planting trees, can we just tell farmers, get into agroforestry, plant trees at homes, grow trees, whether it's fruit trees, whether it's coffee trees or whatever, grow more tree crops and that kind of thing. So Kenya does that. And if we all do that, we feed into a whole. But we've got this strange idea that we can there's some people can sit down at a table and come up with a solution for the whole world that involves prescribing one thing, the same thing to be done in Brazil, China, Kenya, Australia, United States. And that's a fallacy. We are thinking there's a shortcut, and there really isn't any. And that's the challenge, because we suddenly decide we want to all do electric cars. What does it take? What does it take to manufacture electric cars? Huge open cast mines. We are destroying entire environments to make one battery or 10 batteries for 10 cars and that kind of thing. Why don't we see how to improve the internal combustion engine? Not everyone has the charging infrastructure even for electric cars, but the idea of imposing solutions or the same solution in vastly different situations is the problem. So I think we need to bring it down to a bit higher resolution, maybe even regional, if we can, or continental solutions and targets. But right now we have what we call these global biodiversity targets, and they're all just making careers.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
You have a couple online questions.
Okay.
Artie asks, how can we recognize the inflammatory advertising with no history of Africa? Example being the poster, one elephant every 15 minutes. Do we just believe them to be an attempt to arouse compassion with ulterior motives?
Yes, there are attempts to perpetuate the crisis narrative, because unfortunately the crisis narrative has become the driver of funding in conservation, and you see a lot of the conservation people, in the ones I talked about, a common story in conservation is, I've done this for 30 years, but it's still a crisis and I still need more money. So conservation has got to the stage we reward perpetual failure. So they're appreciated for that failure and given more money. So yes, those posters are used to drive the crisis narrative and justify the violence and the money, etc. Yeah.
You did a really beautiful job illustrating how those protected conservation areas exclude the indigenous people and how that's not actually very natural. But what I'm terrified of is all those colonialist industries that you talk about, and they have all that power and all that wealth. And sometimes it feels like those fences are the only thing that might keep them from just stripping all the resources. So how do we protect against the industries?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is true, and that's the success of the propaganda that's created this terror. Like we need to do this right now. How much money will it cost, and this kind of thing. We need some more complex solutions, like the protected areas we have. Rather than try and expand the protected areas, we should try and create connectivity between them, so that animals can move between them, and even the areas where people use for raising livestock. We need to maintain connectivity so that these people can move with their livestock from one place to another, so that their environmental footprint is not too heavy on one spot, and wildlife follows the same spot. So it's, by definition, it has to be a much more sort of complex solution than what people are doing now. A fence is, it makes people feel good. When there's a fence there, people say, oh, thank God, the elephant is on the other side and we are here, and it feels good. But fences are violence. They affect people. And with climate change, sometimes they make a fence there, and then there's a 5-year drought, and suddenly there's no water on our side of the fence. And people start fighting, or people cut the fence, and it all negates the effort. So it's about approaching it in a more complex way. Like I said, involve anthropologists, politicians, it involves politics, it involves a lot of sociology. But right now we are approaching it so strictly from biology and law enforcement. So there's no simple solutions. That's the important thing. But the exclusion of people, the continuous propaganda of exclusion of people, and as Adi was saying, this propaganda, you can't always recognize it for what it is. If you look like the Lion King movie, there's all these African animals in Africa, and they're all speaking in American accents and American voices, and there's no Black people. There's no African presence there. And these are the things that certainly make, like, when a tourist comes from here and goes to Masai Mara and sees some people with herds of cattle, they feel, oh my God, what are these people doing here? That's their home. And that's what we need to step back from a lot of it. But it's not easy, because the propaganda comes at you from all directions, really. And the solutions are necessarily complex. Case by case, yeah.
First, thank you for speaking up. I think we need more voices like yours in this area, because this is my take. Most of our scientists go get the papers, then go get into a job, they keep quiet because they're being funded.
Yeah.
And when the damage is done, that's when they come out and say, oh, I saw it, but I didn't see it, right? I'll use a strong term: environmental terrorists. That is what is happening, whereby the indigenous people are being driven out of their land for the sake of the animals, but they are not accruing the benefit due to them for conserving these animals.
Yeah.
A case in point is, for example, in Tanzania, where the Maasai were driven out of their land, that they've conserved these animals for eons. But now new people who have the means now are coming and driving them out to conserve the land. But the Maasai have been there for millennia, conserving these animals and also eking out a livelihood. So to me, they're environment terrorists, and they should be treated as so. So we need more people like you who are speaking out and calling them what they are, and using whichever media to get the message out. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm curious about this fences. So we know that wildlife is naturally migratory, right? As seasons change and environmental conflicts change, they migrate to a different place and then migrate back to the original place. So how do these fences affect that? I mean, it does not seem detrimental to the very things that we're trying to conserve if they can't move in a sort of natural migratory paths, what happens to it?
Yeah, and there's a connection between both your inputs, because one thing is that the biggest challenge we face is capitalism or capitalists. The global environmental crisis, because it is really the environment is taking a hit, is driven by human behavior, i.e. consumption patterns, and it's driven by capitalism. And the saddest thing is that today we've started thinking capitalists are the saviors. No, they are the problem. We think we can save the environment by trading in carbon credits. That's capitalism. We think Amazon can pollute all this, but Jeff Bezos is saving the environment because he's given $2 billion. No, we have to streamline. Capitalism has to, it's necessary. We can't live without it, but it has to be held responsible. Don't give $2 billion to make a park in Africa. Use $2 billion to clean up your operation here or in New York and whatever. And because of capitalists, we scientists, again, we started offering them shortcuts, and we cleanse them. We greenwash them. So, I mean, in Kenya some years ago, someone wanted to start a sugarcane processing plant in Tana River Delta. And I know a scientist who actually wrote on the environmental impact assessment that there's no endangered species that will be affected here. And I know over 10 endangered species. And the problem is that these capitalists, they've started giving grants to scientists. And scientists have become all about the grant, because you get a grant, you do this, you write a paper, you get more money, etc. So capitalism has even invaded the technical space. So scientists, instead of correcting capitalism, have become the sort of cheerleaders. We are the ones who cleanse them. And because, like what you said about fencing, we know that in a place like even Mount Kenya Forest, imagine you fencing a place with elephants. They'll trash it. They'll destroy that place if you don't leave them room to migrate and move to other places. But it's scientists doing that. You go to those fencing projects, you'll find a scientist is in charge of it. And this is because we've started we are scientists, we are working for the next grant and that kind of thing. So capitalism is a challenge. We need to sort of reset our systems, like the way I suggested universities take grants from those people, but don't tell them your funding is the one funding that project, etc. Where we have environmental impact assessments, let the capitalists pay for it, but they should not know the scientist who does it. They shouldn't pay directly to the scientist. You pay to the government recruits a scientist. So the scientist can say this thing is terrible. And feel free to give his frank report. So we need to change some of these structures, because, yeah, as you said, that's what's brought in the dishonesty. Scientists just do these studies to get the qualifications, to get themselves in a position to get that money, rather than help the environment. So for those who are not scientists, I think we need also to learn to treat science and scientists with some skepticism. You don't believe anything your banker says. You don't believe anything a businessman tells you when he's selling you a pair of shoes or something. You sort of question and examine things. We read the fine print on our credit cards. We should treat science in the same way. Who's funding this? What's the interest? Like, there's some of these things that are obvious, like what you're saying about the fencing. So capitalism is a big challenge to the world today, and sadly, capitalism is destroying the people on whom it depends to sell whatever it is that they're producing.
Yeah. So on that, what are your thoughts about socialism? And not like the Russian Soviet Union. I'm not talking about that. Not even China. But more of economic and environmental socialism, where people in Kenya decide for themselves.
That is, to me, that looks like the only way forward, because to sustainably use an environment, you need to be socialist. If there's a river there, so everyone can collect some water from there. If there's a grassland there, everyone can graze their goats there. But what's going on right now, as we speak in Kenya, is we are even privatizing water resources. Our president was just in the US, he signed some agreement with Coca-Cola, and it's about privatizing some water resources for Nairobi. And this is the problem. When we bring capitalism, and it is touted as we are conserving and managing this water resource, but it's privatization. And we are privatizing water resources, we are privatizing forests, we're privatizing lands. And that's a recipe for even violent conflict. So management of environment, particularly people who live in the environment, sort of grazing animals there, getting water from the nearby river, getting wood fuel from the nearby forests. There has to be a socialist solution for the management of those resources. I think it really is the only way forward. All the money in the world won't help once people take up arms and start fighting for water. Yeah.
Yes.
Is there answer online?
I think this would be a good point to because it ties into his question, and it was, what role is corporate America or the corporate entities playing in exploiting locals under the cover of their government? Remember British East Africa Company during the colonialism?
Yes, they're actually the central players, and sadly, not enough people know this. Like I said, colonialism was a capitalist enterprise. It only became political later, because colonization of East Africa, it started with the Imperial British East Africa Company. India started with the British East India Company or something like that. And they started by trading in resources, spices, whatever it was. And that's where the danger lies, because like in Kenya, our government will happily oppress us to satisfy a capitalist so he can bring in that money. The money Coca-Cola is giving to develop this water resource, it will be fenced. The reservoir will be fenced. So the villager who lives there can't go with his bucket and fetch water, or his goats can't drink there, because all the water is channeled to Nairobi to commercial interests, whether to paying people. Or the target is that every dog must be paid for. And the bit this goat drinks that's not paid for becomes a problem. So yeah, it's the capitalists are very much behind. And the money, the Nature Conservancy and those other, the Nature Conservancy itself doesn't have money. It all comes from capitalist interests. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, I think it's Solio Ranch, what they do, the kind of operation they do. They have a conservancy, and they raise cattle, cows, and juxtapose that with our Maasai brothers who raise cattle and also live with wild animals. But one is profitable, the other one is condemned. Can you speak about that, please?
Yeah, it's very clear prejudice, and it's very stark in Laikipia. Solio is a very successful combined wildlife and livestock operation. Pejeta is as well, very, very successful in that. But when you get outside those conservancies, which are privately owned and by capitalists, and get out into the community land, suddenly livestock is vilified, and the Maasai people who own them, and Samburu people who own them are oppressed in various ways. This is a symptom of our emphasis on tourism, on the way we practice tourism in Kenya. Tourism in Kenya is the way we practice it can be called it's mythical, or it's almost like a neurosis. we are practicing that out of Africa. Kenya is beautiful landscapes, beautiful wildlife, but no people. And you see it even in the posters we put around. And I think that's the problem. So like the perfect image we have in Kenya is of a white person enjoying this landscape with the wildlife and all that. When there's local people with their cows and goats, their house there and all this stuff, these are seen as blemishes on the landscape. And we need to get away from that. We as Kenya, we are firmly to blame for that, because we are the ones who project that image, and we sell that image. That's why tourists get disappointed when they come and meet the guy with his camels there in Samburu. And I always tell them, if you don't want to see Samburu camels and goats and people, don't come to Samburu. If you go to Masai Mara and see Masai people there, remember that word Masai, it's people. It's people. So that's someone's home. And if we can market our country, including the people in the image of our country, we can do so much better. That's why we always fail in competition. When we market only animals, an elephant is the same in Laikipia or Botswana. It looks the same. The only special thing about Kenya is the Kenyan people. Well, the only special thing about any country is the people. So when we only market animals, we are on a losing track. But our tourism industry and the ministry cannot understand this simple thing. And heaven knows I've told them many times. Yeah.
So how do I, as an individual with limited resources, limited reach, how do I get involved? How do I make a difference?
Good question. I think emphasizing the messaging, and even as whichever forum or in whichever way you talk about Kenya, we should emphasize what we have that we do for ourselves, whether it's the crops we grow, the crops people grow, and what we eat, etc. Not what we export or what is done to attract the external gaze. So I think emphasis on the beauty of what our people do, where they live, the quirks, the cultural quirks, where the people, the trends. Kenya is crazy with the trends, and there's new ones coming every now and again, like going up and down. So I think that's what's really interesting about Kenya, and it's not talked about enough outside. I mean, outside the country, because the messaging that goes out from the government, Kenya Tourism Board, even the private tourism investors, is always this wildlife. We have the World Rally Championship. There's a leg in Kenya, and they're going to put it in the national park. So it's this crazy thing of rally cars driving at 200 kilometers an hour past zebras. It's ridiculous, but that's what our government does. So I think we need to emphasize the stuff that only Kenyans know, because you know that background, you know the interesting things people do in the back streets of Nyeri or something like that, and just present that complexity, that complexity, because out here the image of Kenya is so cultivated and simplified from the days of Roosevelt to the present. Yeah.
To your point, I was just thinking that Jackie and I have been to China on a photography trip, and we've been to Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
In China, the theme was landscapes and people.
Mm-hmm.
And then we spent more time going from one little community to the next, focusing on the different communities around where we were at. When you go to Kenya, it's animal photography and a walk to a make-believe Maasai village.
Yeah, it's up there.
And that's the essence of culture, is this fake village, which is nothing. Even, I mean, when I was a kid, visit Maasai villages, and they're nothing like what they show you.
Yeah,
So it's almost as if they're apologizing
yeah,
for the absurdity of being African, while in China they were very proud of their tradition and their culture. It's a huge difference.
yeah. That's true. Like in India as well. If you visited those as a tourist, you visit some of those temples. You visit and they give you time to visit and you go in. It's a temple. There's priests and stuff doing their thing there, and you go in at a given time. You can take photos, look around, and you get up. But it's a working temple. There's nothing they're doing to entertain you. They're doing their thing. You're just there. You're just there to see and participate in a limited way. The other thing is that you go to the highest class 5-star hotel in India. They will not serve Western food, they serve Indian food. Very nice Indian food. If you go to the 5-star hotel in Nairobi, they will serve you caviar and and whatever food you might find in Europe and that kind of thing. It's because we keep doing what we imagine someone wants us to do, not what we are good at. Just,
I know you said that that's the effect of capitalism, but do you think it's also the effect of colonialism on the country?
yeah, absolutely. And those are very closely tied because colonialism was very much a capitalist project. It was to exploit. It was to exploit resources. It was to extract what can you get out of this country and that kind of thing. And if you look at the definitions or identity or attitudes towards Africa in particular European countries, it's a colonial kind of attitude. Our tea industry, our coffee industry are still controlled very much from the UK. You won't believe how much resources we spend growing flowers for the European market. These flowers we use to fertilizer, pesticide, and no contribution whatsoever to our food security as a nation. And these are things we have to, there's a lot we have to rethink. Because colonialism and capitalism, they're like twins. In fact, it's just that now capitalists don't come with guns and weapons. They come with contracts and grants and that kind of thing and global ideas. What you want, export ideas. Yeah. We are in a very complicated time now. The guys with guns, at least we could see, okay, there's a bad guy. But now, now they look very friendly and we get taken. Yeah, so on there, there's that's my blog. You find a lot of my writings there, so I maybe like put some stuff up there. So feel free to engage even on social media and keep the conversations going. Yeah.
Do you have copies of the book?
Oh no, no, unfortunately we don't have any, but you can talk to Skit about how to get hold of it and order it. Yeah.
Fisher is big
Conservation.
Thank you. That's on Amazon.
Yes,
ironically.
Yes. We are in there.
Yeah.
They're in that gulag. Yeah.
So I was just thinking, you talked about state capture, and can you tie it with capitalism and how it's being used to bring in legislation to marginalize the people?
Yeah. First of all, I didn't go into details. The organization I was talking about, Space for Giants, on the website, they actually say if you join, you see after they've got all those presidents to sign on to that agreement, they actually advertise there that if you give us a grant of X amount, we will invite you to this meeting where you can meet Uhuru Kenyatta. You can meet. They actually, they write it, they express the benefits of giving us a grant, access to heads of state, natural resource agreements, where there's oil, you can get an oil exploration contract, etc. Now in Kenya, actually, what is causing a lot of displacement of people now is that agreements are being signed, and what's on offer is a company that's polluting in Europe or whatever is offered a way to annex a huge land in Kenya to do their carbon offsets so that they can meet whatever regulatory requirements in the states. Because if you see that the lands that communities are losing in northern Kenya, the buyers of those carbon credits are mostly Netflix, Meta. I think Google is in there as well. So those capitalists are very much behind the legislation, and a legislation has just come up now. It just 2-3 days ago, just this week, that is giving regulations for these carbon offset agreements, including taxation levels, so-called permitting processes, and so the government is also taking its cut. So they've very much driven that legislation, these capitalist interests. Yeah.
Artie asks, is the exclusion of the indigenous people from the tourist areas intentional prejudice or a mixture of prejudice and greed/economics? If they aren't a part of the experience, the money is remain with the company?
Yes, it's the exclusion is just to meet the criteria of the product. We offered you a holiday in a splendidly isolated landscape. So to create that, we have to remove people. But those people, they don't get any benefit. The money from the tourism goes to the investor. Goes to the investor. So it's very deliberate.
So for the sake of the Zoom audience, we probably need to officially come to a close, and then you guys are welcome to talk forever as far as I'm concerned. But, any other questions from your standpoint? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.